Hey VC, Big Star 1000 with a return of the Gimme 10 series. These are videos in which I make a list of 10 great records in a given genre or time period. I've been doing these since 2013, so quite a while now, and there are there's a playlist of 68 Gimme 10s on my channel, so if you're interested in them, they range from the topics that interest me personally, from jazz to psychedelic music to post-punk and then there's also years from 70 to 79, from 80 to 89. There's all sorts of things there, so you probably already know this. So this information is kind of redundant. When I do a Gimme 10, it's always for me, because it enables me to revisit a section of my collection that I had previously neglected. And I spent a lot of time, for example, when I did this Gimme 10, when I was preparing for it, I invested a lot of personal time looking into the records and thinking about what records to include and thinking about the historical background of these records, and sort of I could provide you with something half decent. In saying this, I am a complete dilettante when it comes to UK jazz, which is the topic of today. I wasn't alive then, and I can only go by what I've been reading. So excuse me for my stupidity, and don't jump at my throat if I don't mention a record or another. I am aware of a lot of records. I don't have them all, and there are records that I find very, very desirable in this subgenre of music. For example, records by Graham Collier, or records by Michael Gibbs, which I would love to have, but the money is just the obstacle there, and the rarity of the record. Yeah, so I don't know where I was going with this. I'm going to talk about the 60s and 70s UK jazz scene. This is a three-part Gimme 10 on UK jazz. So today, UK jazz 60s, 70s. Next week, it will be jazz rock from the 70s from the UK. And the following week, I will talk about modern purveyors of the style from 2010 and beyond. So just to round it off a bit. So what to say about the UK jazz scene of the time? Now, I'm not going to talk about the originators of the pioneers like Tabby Hayes or Ronnie Scott, who very much tried to establish the American bebop tradition in the UK, and were very much into copying the sounds of people like Sonny Rollins and the like. I'm more interested in those other musicians who wanted to bring their own idiosyncratic style, like Ian Carr or Keith Tippett or Michael Garrick or Mike Westbrook. I'm going to talk about John Sermon and John McLaughlin, and I'm going to talk about Chris McGregor and the Blue Notes, Amanda De Silva, Joe Harriet, Norma Winston. These are the names I'm going to drop today, as well as kind of other artists that sort of cross over with prog, like the Soft Machine, for example, Robert Wyatt. The first record that I want to talk about today, and so what I've done here is I've tried to make it sort of a link between all the records, because there is a great deal of cross-pollination between those records, because the scene is not a huge scene in London. It's a fairly limited pool of people, And you know, you've got, for example, someone like Ian Carr, who plays trumpet and flugelhorn on 6 of these 10 records. Or you know, you've got Norma Winston, who sings on 3 of these records. So you've got a great deal of, you know, crossover. So I wanted to highlight this crossover by linking a record to another. You know, the first record on this list is also the most affordable, the most available, and one of the best records on this list, and it is the fabulous, frantic, energetic, brilliant record by John McLaughlin called Extrapolation from 1969. It features Tony Oxley on drums, who was, I think, the house drummer for Ronnie Scott for many years, and Brian Hodges on bass. It also features John Sermon on sax, and John Sermon is really, you know, in and amongst the UK jazz scene, probably, you know, the equal most revered sax player, along with Alan Skidmore. And John Sermon absolutely makes this record. He absolutely cooks on this. It's a beautiful kind of post-bop, kind of jazz fusionish record, this one, and it doesn't bear any resemblance to what John McLaughlin came to become famous for, which is, you know, he's like Mahavishnu style fusion. There are little elements of jazz fusions on this, but it's got more in common with the John McLaughlin that played on In a Silent Way, for example. It's a beautiful record. This is a 1972 press on Polydor, American press. I highly recommend this. And so I was talking about John Sermon, and John Sermon makes an appearance on this record, which is Chris McGregor's Brotherhood of Breath. And this is a South African record, but I mean, the Blue Notes and the Brotherhood of Breath were very much bands that sort of made it on the London scene. There's even liner notes inside that said that sort of, I think there's yeah, probably the most exciting band of any kind in London at the present. So Chris McGregor is South African pianist. There he is. He's a white guy, and the rest of the band are black South African musicians. Includes Dudu Pokwana, Mangezi Feza on trumpet, and Louis, whatever his name is, Louis Maholo on drums. So the Blue Notes or the Brotherhood of Breath, same kind of a band. They emerged from South Africa and then they sort of moved to London. They're a very, very frenetic, very exciting band for the time. They're very different from the rest of the scene. And Chris McGregor's mum was Scottish anyway, so, but to say that these people don't belong in this list is blasphemous, really, because they really do belong on the scene. And Chris McGregor then really played on a whole lot of other UK albums, and even played on Brighter Later. Nick Drake, he appears on it. You can check on the credits. I think he plays piano on Poor Boy. This is a fantastic experimental big band, avant-garde jazz mixture. It's fantastic. On this, on trombone, you have a guy called Nick Evans, who plays on this. And Nick Evans appears on this fantastic kind of jazz fusion efforts by Keith Tippett. So it's a brainchild of Keith Tippett. It features Elton Dean on alto sax from the Soft Machine. Also a contribution by Robert Wyatt on drums on this. But by and large, this is a jazz record with a kind of a big band sound plus a sort of a jazz fusion undertone, kind of proggy at times, bombastic, beautiful records, you know, kind of in the same wheelhouse as maybe sort of like Electric Miles records. The first track, This Is What Happens, is an absolute monster. I don't have this on vinyl, evidently. This is a limited edition of 3000, which is still nice to have. It's kind of like a vinyl replica. Sounds great anyway. The cover art is by Roger Dean, and Roger Dean will appear later again. But this is a fantastic record by Keith Tippett, the pianist Keith Tippett. And I can't talk about Keith Tippett without talking about Centipede. And Centipede is the mother of all big band records on the UK jazz scene. It's got a cast of 1,000. You've got you know, all the Blue Notes on there. You've got the band Nucleus is there. You've got obviously Keith and Julie Tippett. Some members of the Soft Machine. The list is exhaustive. Alan Skidmore is on this. This is again a frantic kind of very melodic in parts and sort of quite experimental in other parts. Like it's approached with caution kind of thing, but it's essential. You've got some parts of just really free jazz, avant-garde jazz, and some other parts are just really melodic and kind of very easy to get into. So but it's a beautiful record from 1960, maybe 70, the early 70s, I don't know. And some of the lyrics were composed in 1971. So some of the lyrics were composed by Julie Tippett, the wife of Keith Tippett, Julie Driscoll, who started a career amongst the Brian Auger and Trinity. And I should talk about Brian Auger, but I will talk about Brian Auger in next week's installment of Jazz Rock. Fantastic record. So this includes the whole of Nucleus, and Nucleus is an essential band on this scene. Nucleus is the brainchild of Ian Carr, Carl Jenkins. Ian Carr plays trumpet and flugelhorn on this. Carl Jenkins plays the piano and the oboe as well on this. And you also have a great contribution by the guitar shredder Chris Spedding, which makes this record rather a jazz rock, jazz fusion record. His contribution takes it into the jazz rock realm. This is their first album with a fantastic Roger Dean cover. This is an original Japanese press on Philips. Sounds really good. The original UK is on Vertigo. This is in the same wheelhouse and same ballpark as a record like Bitches Brew. Very much in the same ballpark. Fantastic first record. Solar Plexus is very worth investigating as well. As good, and we'll talk about it later. Is again another stellar record. So a fantastic band. So a direct segue, I guess, is to talk about the Don Rendell and Ian Carr quintet, because on this, obviously, you've got Ian Carr. Ian Carr appears on six of these records, and is a fantastic trumpet flugelhorn player who's sadly passed away, but as a lasting contribution on that scene. This is one of 5 or 6 of the Rendell Carr quintet records, and in my opinion is the most successful of them. It's a beautiful modal jazz record, up there with the best even American modal jazz records. It is a very solid, very beautiful effort, and the title track Dust Fire is really worth hearing. So is the opener Ruth is beautiful. These were reissued very lovingly by Jazzman Records. Although it does say mono, I don't think it's a mono version of it. But nonetheless, it's a beautiful repress with a beautiful flip back cover. just really highly recommended. And so on this you've got obviously Don Rendell on sax and Ian Carr on trumpet, and you've got Michael Garrick on piano. And Michael Garrick is a key musician, again a key UK musician, and Michael Garrick's key record is called The Heart is a Lotus, featuring vocals by Norma Winston. And I have that record on iTunes, you know, in a sort of digital way, but I don't have the record as a vinyl to show you. But I do have this archival release on Gearbox Records, which is the prelude to Heart is a Lotus, with Don Rendell and Ian Carr. It's basically the same band as on this, really, but the band leader is Michael Garrick. There is value in those versions which don't feature Norma Winston on vocals, so you've got sort of kind of naked versions, and I think some people would rather listen to this without her vocals on. I mean, it's a matter of taste, but I think it's a very worthy record to get. Michael Garrick plays piano, harpsichord and celeste. Michael Garrick, like Ian Carr, is no longer with us, but this is an excellent, yeah, kind of modal jazz, kind of big band type of record. But there's a couple of tracks which I'm not fond of. For example, there's a track called Sweet and Sugary Candy, which I think is just too, it's just too sweet and sugary and candy. Ian Carr also appears on this other big band record. I think there's 3 real big band records there. There's the Centipede, there's this, and there's the final record that I'll show you in a minute. Neil Ardley, synth keyboards player, composer. This is rather like a third stream record in some ways, you know. It's kind of, this has got a real classical approach to it, to the composition. Has Barbara Thompson on soprano and alto sax and on flute. Has Tony Coe on clarinet and bass clarinet, and Ian Carr obviously is the link. Ian Carr is on this. This is a fantastic symphony by Neil Ardley. Also worth investigating is the Symphony of Amaranth. His first record, which is really hard to find, is meant to be a scorcher of record, but I don't have it, and it's so hard. It's called the Greek Variations, or AJ in Greek Variations, and it's under the name the Carr, Neil Ardley and Ian Carr quartet or something, whatever it is. Very hard to get, too expensive, but nonetheless, this is very attainable as an like, this is an original press. You can get this quite easily, quite cheaply. I think amongst all the records that I've showed you, with extrapolation is the most easily accessible record, and very highly recommended. Beautiful, sort of, yeah, big band, kind of third stream ish record. A kaleidoscope of rainbows. 2 more. And so Ian Carr also, again, appears on this, and this is a masterpiece, really. And I was really going back and forth with Joe Harriott and Amancio da Silva, because integration is fantastic. The Indo Jazz Fusion is fantastic. Cosmic Eye record is fantastic. But I've gone for this one. I think this one is probably the one that I go back to the most. Very beautiful modal jazz with an Eastern flavor. So Joe Harriott is from Jamaica, I think, was from Jamaica, dead a long time ago. And Amancio da Silva is an Indian guitar player. But both of them, like Chris McGregor, like the Blue Notes, made their names on the UK jazz scene. And to prove this, you have the backing band with Norma Winston, the queen vocalist of that scene, Ian Carr and flugelhorn, are both on this. This is really a superb piece of music. Up there, like it's probably one of the very, very best records from that time. Hum Dono, which was reissued on Vocalion quite a few years ago. 2015. I don't know if you can still get those, but this is very, very highly recommended. Beautiful. Yeah, modal. Yeah, post-bop kind of record. Fantastic. With Eastern flavors. And the last but not least, so I was talking about Norma Winston on this, and Norma Winston is awesome on this. She sings the whole way through. Mike Westbrook's Love Song. So Mike Westbrook, pianist also, who composed this suite of songs, love songs, according to poems that his wife had written. Her name was what was her name? Caroline Westbrook. Caroline Westbrook wrote the poems, and this is sublime. This record. It's an amazing, brassy, bombastic, experimental big band record, but lots of melody, lots of some scat vocals, very operatic suite of songs. Yeah. So I don't know what you know, if you've got some reaction to this list. I don't know. I'm just finishing very strangely. But in any case, these were 10 great records. Obviously, as I said, there are artists that I will mention next week in the jazz rock, if I didn't mention them today. Yeah, talk about the Soft Machine and, you know, Brian Auger next week, and artists of that of the like. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Leave me some comments, and take care, VC.